I'm Jessica, 30 years old and an office worker. I live with my husband, Kenny, and our son, Larry, who is in the 5th grade. Larry is very interested in keeping killifish now. He is not satisfied with just keeping them and enjoys creating new varieties by breeding them himself. Keeping killifish seems to be a popular activity, and he keeps in touch with people. He meets on social networking sites, exchanging opinions about the killifish he is raising. It seems that many of the people he interacts with on social networking sites are adults, so he needs to use language that is not rude. When I jokingly said this, Larry replied with a serious look on his face.
There is no CEO, but it seems to have a member of parliament. He said he was busy during the campaign.
I did not listen carefully because it was on a social networking site, and it sounded like something a 5th grader would say. Even when Larry is told that he is a member of parliament, Larry does not seem to understand how great he is. For Larry, a person who creates a new species of killifish, which has never been seen before, is greater than others. When I think of a great man, I immediately think of Kenny's father, a high-ranking bureaucrat. My father-in-law graduated from a top university and has always followed the career bureaucratic path. He is an arrogant man and completely looked down on me because I was born in an ordinary family. I wondered how he could allow such a marriage between me and Kenny, but Kenny explained it with a sad look on his face to me.
My dad doesn't think of me as his own kid after I failed the entrance exam at a top university and a public employee exam.
Apparently, Kenny could not get into the university which Ron graduated from, and he got a job at a private company, which he didn't want. Kenny has an older brother who graduated from the same university as Ron, and he became a national public employee and a career bureaucrat just like Ron. It seems that Ron does not think Kenny is his son because Kenny is not a career bureaucrat. Seems to be that Ron does not think Kenny is his son because Kenny is not a career bureaucrat. And after Kenny got a job, Ron treated him coldly. When I went to my parents-in-law's wedding greeting, only my mother-in-law, Susan, met us, but Ron never even showed up. Susan is also not happy with Ron treating Kenny coldly. She said, "I'm sorry even you came here all the way to say hello."
Ron won't even see Kenny because he is not a public employee. And Ron says, "Kenny is not my son."
Susan told me angrily. Kenny said, "I have already given up and not sad, so I don't care anything."
Even today, I didn't come to see Ron. I just wanted to introduce Jessica to you.
He told Susan with a laugh. Kenny laughed and told Susan. Listening to their conversation, I was daunted by the thought of being a wife in a very complicated family. At our wedding reception, an old brother-in-law, Hector, showed up only to say hello and left immediately. After the reception was over, Susan was still apologizing to my parents.
Apologies about my husband and son left in the middle of the reception.
My parents were afraid of Susan's apology, but after the reception, my father, Zach, complained,
I don't like it that Susan is a nice and humble person, but Ron is arrogant because of his big position at work.
My mother, Alice, also went with a troubled look.
Jessica seems to have a hard time because the family background is so different.
I don't usually get involved with Ron, so don't worry. Ron doesn't seem to want to see me, who is the loser, so Jessica won't have to see him either.
Kenny had heard his parents' conversation. He's trying to reassure and told them. My parents were reassured by Kenny's explanation, but I'm wondering if I will really be okay. And I became even more worried. In fact, as Kenny said, I rarely go to my parents-in-law's house, nor did I receive any contact from San Francisco. And I was able to spend my life with Kenny safely when I found out after a year of marriage that I was having a baby. I contacted Susan and she was very happy to hear about it. But there was not a word from Ron. Since Victor and his wife have no children, it would be my parents-in-law's first grandchild, and once we have a baby. I was hoping that Ron's attitude would change. However, when I gave birth to my son Larry, I contacted Susan, and she was the only one who came to see the child. Ron has never showed up. After Susan left, Alice laughed bitterly, saying, Larry shouldn't be a high-ranking bureaucrat if Ron doesn't come to see such a lovely grandchild. My dad is not interested in anything that has nothing to do with his career. He says in public that he is serving the people, but actually he is just working for his own greed. I felt sorry for Ron, who was looked at like that by Kenny, but in the end he never came to see Larry, and Kenny never received any celebration call from him. Instead of him, Susan came to the hospital many times, and she visited our house after I was discharged because the first grandchild may be cute. She had taken many photos of him with her smartphone, and I asked her, "Are you going to show Larry's photos to Ron?"
No way! That old man is not interested in his grandchildren.
Susan returned to her illusory gentle smile immediately, but I could see clearly again that she was also quite dissatisfied with Ron. After that, Ron never came to see Larry. But Susan came to our house to see him on Children's Days, birthdays, or any other occasions. We never thought to go and visit my in-laws' house, and we never went home for New Year's or summer holidays either. Susan came and visited us by herself if she wanted to see Larry, so there was no need for us to go to my parents-in-law's house. And on the contrary, Kenny also told me that he would never go to his parents' house when Larry joined kindergarten. Susan stayed at our house the day before the field day and joined us. I'm wondering if Ron is all right by himself. Well, he has a man, and that man is better off without me. Susan says meaningfully. When Larry entered elementary school, Susan always came to stay over whenever there was an event, such as a field day or a study presentation. Larry would also appreciate her. But on the other hand, he called Ron, whom I hardly ever met, old man, and treated him like a stranger. Susan calls Ron old man when she comes over to our house, so Larry followed and called him like that too. The other day, Susan came over the day before Larry's field day and said to Larry, "My old man seems to think that golf is more important than Larry's field day, even though he's a terrible golfer." but his junior staff praise him, so he feels good about it and goes every time when he has a day off. Since childhood, Larry had heard Susan complaining about him, and he seemed to dislike Ron more and more. However, energetic Susan, who used to show up at all of Larry's school events, twisted her leg this year, making it difficult to walk by herself. She can walk with a cane, but she can no longer visit our home as casually as she used to. She missed us because she could no longer attend school events and came to me saying that she wanted to see Larry's face at New Year's. So Larry and I decided to go to my parents-in-law's house, as I asked Kenny to come, but he really didn't want to go, so I didn't force him to go with us. But I still felt uncomfortable seeing Ron. Susan told me it is not necessary to see Ron, but I think it would be rude to go to my parents-in-law's house if we don't see him. When I went to my in-laws' house on New Year's Day, there were many people, which I expected of a high-ranking bureaucrat. Many people were visiting to greet Ron, and a secretary-like person invited the guests in turn into Ron's room. Larry and I were not visitors, so we greeted him lightly and were supposed to move to Susan's place. But Ron found and shouted at us, "What are you guys doing here? Don't come into my house without permission." I was yelled at and replied with a shudder, "Oh, I came to see Susan." Then Ron replied with a scoff. Then Ron replied with a scary look on his face.
You guys will have to line up in order and say hello to me first.
When the secretary heard this, she asked Larry and me to line up at the end of the line of visitors who are waiting their turn. Besides my nervousness about Ron, Ray looks bored. I thought of letting Larry go to Susan's room, but I didn't want to get yelled at by Ron again, so I decided to wait and do what he taught. Eventually, Ray wanted to go to the bathroom, and I let him go there alone, but he's still not back yet. Larry finally came back, and when our turn is next.
It's like waste of time dealing with poor people like you. You're haughty. Well, Ron yelled at us like that. Then Larry and I, were put on the back burner again.
I was taken aback, and Larry said to me,
We came here to see our grandma, so why should we be bothered by an old man? Mom, can I tell my best friend, who is a minister, and ask him to confront the old man? I think...
I didn't know what Larry said, but I said, "You can't say old man. Today you have to say grandpa," Big scolded Larry in a small voice, and he retorted with an unfaithful look on his face.
But Grandma always calls him old man. Besides, everyone gives New Year's gift of cash to Gold Man, but that's unfair because he's not a child.
The visitors who were standing in line stared at us all at once because of Larry's words. As we were about to leave the in-laws' house because Ron would kick us out if we stood in line here any longer, then Susan appeared in a wheelchair and stopped me, and Larry believed. I followed Susan and was able to safely enter her room. That's when Susan saw me looking like I was about to cry. She didn't expect us to be waiting with other visitors.
So she apologized for being late to pick us up. Indeed, that old man is a mean person.
Susan apologized deeply, in contrast to my almost crying face.
Esdroras, isn't it a bad thing that the old man is a mean person? isn't a bad thing that the old man is getting New Year's gift cash from everyone. I think my best friend, who's in the minister position, hired an old man. It's like, should I ask my friend to give a warning to the old man?
Susan reassured me, and I didn't really listen to what Larry said. But Susan suddenly became serious.
Well, Larry, you're right. We should ask Larry's best friend to scold Ron. That's what she said and nodded repeatedly.
At Pinsagisabes, and the old man, even though everyone kept waiting, always talked amicably with a young woman wearing an apron. When they came to greet him, he turned them away as soon as he received a New Year's gift of cash. He even talked about it, so I hurriedly told Larry.
Oh well, never mind about that. I have to give a souvenir to Susan.
I glanced at Susan's face and saw that she is clearly angry, and I don't know what to do. When Larry went into his grandparents' house to use the restroom, he looked around and seemed to have discovered Ron's secret. The fact that he is receiving New Year's gift of cash from visitors probably means it's not good money, and he is friendly to the young woman in an apron, probably a maid. One day Susan was talking sarcastically about the maid, so I guessed. I was relieved to finally be able to greet Susan, but then she became grumpy at the mention of Larry, and I was completely exhausted at the beginning of the new year. Larry was happy to receive a New Year's gift of cash from Susan, but I was in the mood to go home right away.
Shall we go home?
Although Susan wanted to talk more to Larry, she seemed to notice my feelings and told Larry with a smile, "Well, come visit me again." Then Larry looked angry and replied back to Susan, "I'm going to beat that old man until I come and visit you again." He's very sly and bad because he's not taking care of you, and he's the only one who receives a New Year's gift of cash. Susan was surprised for a moment but soon smiled and said,
Larry is going to punish him? I'm counting on you.
"I'll ask my best friend, who is the minister, to scold the old man." "Please just wait and see," he shouted happily. Susan looked at me strangely when she heard my best friend's minister, but she seemed to think it was a child's joke and quickly answered, "Well then, please ask your best friend who is the minister to help us. I'd like to see Ron be scolded too." As it was, Larry and I left my in-laws' home and returned home. The awkward New Year's greeting to my in-laws' home was over, and I had forgotten all about Larry's story. After a month of the new year, I was surprised to read in a small article in the newspaper that Ron resigned. It was abrupt for retirement, and it was even written as a resignation. But actually, it may be in effect an ouster. Suddenly, I remembered what Larry had said. Kenny had seen the same article in the newspaper, and as soon as he got home, he smiled and wondered if Ron did something wrong. God gave him punishment, when he said it with a splash of excitement. Larry looked proud of himself and said, "It was not God's punishment because I asked for it." I told my best friend, who's the minister, and what I saw at my grandmother's house at New Year's. Then he praised me for teaching him. Then to our surprise, Larry showed us his smartphone. There were posts on social networking sites by fellow killifish keepers, including the name of the current minister. That minister was Ron's boss, and it was only then we realized that Larry's best friend, who is the real minister, had assumed that person's nickname was a minister. But when I learned that the current minister was Larry's fellow killifish breeder, Kenny and I were surprised to find ourselves speechless. Then I got a call from Susan, and Kenny asked her before she spoke, "Mom, did my dad get fired? Did he get into some kind of trouble?" We could hear Susan's happy voice in reply,
Thanks to Larry, the old man got scolded by the minister. Thanks again.
Larry also looked happy and said, "You see, my best friend who is the minister and a great guy, so he can give a punishment to the old man." The only people who visited my in-laws' home during the New Year period were those who had business interests with Ron. Bryn was taking bribes from these people. When the minister was informed of Ron's unauthorized actions by Larry, he apparently questioned Ron directly, but Ron denied it. However, the people who gave a bribe to Ron were frustrated with him because they didn't receive any return from him, though they admitted it themselves. After his evil scheme was discovered by his grandson, Larry, and abandoned by the bribe side, Bryn was fired when the minister was informed of the truth. In addition, Larry caught him having an affair with a woman who was a maid, and he was held responsible for this as well. Susan knew about the affair for some time before and had suppressed solid evidence, so she took the opportunity of Ron's resignation to divorce him and demand alimony. Since Ron originally came to my parents-in-law's house as a son-in-law, they divorced and kicked him out of the house, then demanded alimony. It seems that Victor was also taking bribes along with Ron. Chin and Victor quit the bureaucracy and got a job at a subsidiary private company of the government. But Ron couldn't find a job due to no one liking him apparently. He was greedy and wanted money, so it was no choice everyone hated him. Ron, who was kicked out of his parents-in-law's house, now lives with his old brother-in-law's family and has already broken up with the maid who had an affair with him. The hardest thing for Ron was rumored to be a candidate for the next national election, but now he is gone with this sudden resignation. The sudden resignation has become a hot topic in the media, with stories ranging from near true to outright rumors spreading. Rumors are spreading, ranging from near true to outright false, making it impossible to even go outside. We don't know which rumors are true, but at least Ron was pulled off the stage. After Ron left, our family started living together at Susan's house to take care of her. Although she has had occasional home helpers, now she is happy because her family members are taking care of her. Then her leg is recovering well. Larry also seems to find the spacious in-laws house more convenient for keeping killifish. He seems to enjoy taking care of them more than ever. Thanks to the minister whom he met through this killifish keeping, both Kenny and Susan were able to get revenge on Ron, so they are grateful to Larry and the killifish. We are living in a gorgeous house due to unexpected circumstances. Kenny, Susan, and Larry are in a good mood every day, and I am very happy. I thought Larry had not grown up yet, but he was the one who helped the whole family this time.